What's going on, everybody? This is Jerome Moore, host and creator of Deep Dish Conversations. And firstly, I want to say thank you for all love and support, and thank you for exploring the perspectives of social change with me on this platform. I want to encourage you all to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast listen platform. And make sure you give us a 5-star rating if you're loving the Deep Dish Conversations. I appreciate all of the support again. I hope you all enjoy this episode. Hendrell, welcome to the platform. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
And I'm glad that you're here. And I did it off camera. I'm gonna do it right now on camera. And for our listeners, you are the first Black elected chair for the Tennessee Democratic Party of Tennessee. Congratulations, kudos, flowers are being given to you right now, from black man to black man, from human to human. Just excellence, man. Just congratulations on that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Nah, man. I know I told you off the air, I have my feelings about politics when it comes to and black folks in politics and in the relationship. But I know what you accomplished is still a major feat for black people at the same light and for politics. So, man, thank you, man, and wish you much success. And now that we got that out the way, let's get into the real deal. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good. I mean, you know, it's been a hell of a year and a few months and some change. But I feel pretty good. I think I'm in a really good place. I think the party's at a good place, and my mindset in life is that it could always be worse, as long as we're heading in the right direction. I think that's good. Now, am I mentally sane as I was a year and 3 months ago? Hell no. But I'm in a good place, and I think we're in a good place to grow as well. So,
man, before we get into all the party and political stuff, man, you are from Memphis.
Yes.
And I told you this off air. I'm gonna tell you again, so people will know Nashville is a place Memphians come to be great. You know, I'm gonna say it like that. And a lot of Memphis folks, I know they were like, nah, Memphis versus Nashville. Look, y'all are here. You know, we welcome you.
I like to think of it as we're always great. We just really come here to shine.
Oh,
a little bit brighter,
I like that. Oh, yeah, hey, yeah, because it is kind of a little cloudy in Memphis sometimes. You know, I understand that. I want to get into like a little bit up into like your upbringings in Memphis, and like what inspired you to get into politics. I know your mom 8 kids. Yeah. You 4 of 8?
Yes.
Something like my research is impeccable.
No,
I know,
yeah.
man.
I see you've done the research.
Yeah, like so, man, that's a lot.
You took my favorite line right from me right there.
That's a lot, man. So tell us a little bit about like growing up in Memphis and having 7 other siblings, and where you kind of fit into that mix, and like how did that help you become who you are today?
Yeah, so people often see me and they meet me around the state and they think, well, this guy is well spoken and he's well put together. He must have went to a private school and had a good middle class family, which really isn't the case. I had a pretty interesting upbringing. 4th of 8 kids, born to a single mom who never graduated from high school. The part of that story that a lot of people hadn't heard is that on top of my mom raising her own 8 children, she actually raised 4 of my cousins as well.
Wow.
All boys.
Wow.
So we were a large extended family. We grew up in poverty. My mom depended on public assistance. She worked low-wage jobs. She worked part-time jobs, whatever she had to do to make sure that she made ends meet to be able to take care of us. But we had an extended network of folks who really looked out for us. My grandmother, she had a twin sister. I mean, so our family was a really close-knit, well put together family from the side of being there for each other.
Right.
And it's a driver of my life, because the way I grew up was, if you don't have anything else, you've got love, you've got opportunity. And now, as I progress through life, I see people having meltdowns over some of the simplest things. Right. And I'm like, it could be a lot worse than not having the right flavor in your Starbucks drink. It could be a lot worse. Right. But and on the same flip side, I mean, we endured some tough times. I mean, my family is no anomaly to what a lot of black families in poverty have gone through. I mean, I've lived in a house where the electricity has been disconnected, and my folks have to make the choice between, do I pay the utility bill or do I pay the rent? I've lived in a household where I watched my mom for many years fall victim to domestic violence on almost a weekly basis, and been the fourth of 8 children.
Right there in the middle, yeah.
Somehow, I became like this father figure for like everybody in the family, and it's still that way. Some days now I'm like, hell, can y'all call somebody else? Can you pick up the phone and call somebody else? But realistically, you know, I would like to say I was way mature than what my age
Right.
projected at that time. I spent a whole lot of time with my grandmother and her twin sister. I mean, a whole lot of time from them. So I gained a lot of wisdom. I gained a lot of knowledge that most young people probably wouldn't have had. And, you know, I had friends. My friends were no different from a lot of young black boys that's growing up in low income communities or
Right.
impoverished communities. And, you know, we could have went any direction. I think I owe a big part to, you know, where I am now, to the fact that my mother was committed to making sure that, you know, she didn't graduate from high school, but she made sure that all of her children graduated from high school
Right.
and either went to college or joined the military. And,
Right.
and you know, we're doing pretty well for ourselves for the circumstances that we inherited at birth. But at the same time, there was other people who kind of took me under their wings as well. I had 2 teachers who showed me for the first time what middle class lifestyles were like. I would spend summers and weekends at their homes. They were teachers, their husbands were doctors, and they really took me in a way that I don't think my life would have been impacted the way that it was had I not been open-minded, and if they weren't willing to say, I'm going to take this kid from the projects or kid from the hood and take him under my wing and show him what life can be like if you work hard, if you believe in yourself, and if you really take advantage of opportunities that's out there. And I think that was one of the biggest difference makers in my life.
Man, and so we have similar kind of socioeconomic backgrounds. Not all the same, but similar. And so I got to ask you this question. And then I'm gonna go forward a little bit, and I'm gonna go back. Now, at what point, like, or when was that point in your life where you know you could have went either way, you know, and you know you want to be here, but here doesn't kind of reflect what you look like or anything around you. When was that point you like, okay, this is what I need to do to get here, but also like remaining who you are though at the same time, and not conforming or or doing anything that's conflicting with who you are socially, morally, spiritually, to get to where you know you want to go.
Well, I could almost tell you the exact moment in my life where I said, this is where I want to go. I still know who I am, but this is where I want to go. I was in the 11th grade. I had dreadlocks. A lot of people don't know that about me. I had dreadlocks. I was living in the moment, and I transferred to a new school.
Okay. And
no one knew me. I didn't have friends, anybody there, and I had an opportunity to say, like, okay, you got a chance to go off and do something different from what you were planning to do growing up in the hood and being around all your friends. And I ended up like running for senior class president, and I gave my first public speech. And from there, life kind of like just started taking its own shape for me. But even in that moment, I had to deal with like my classmates thinking like I was a pretty popular kid, but my classmates were like, this kid is probably the valedictorian. And then when I wasn't the valedictorian, it was like stunning to them. But I was like, y'all the only people that thought that. But it was in that moment, in that high school, in that leadership role, that I really began to navigate this. People call it code switching. I call it being able to navigate this diverse world that we live in. How do you interact with white people? How do you interact with black people? How do you interact with Asian and Hispanic people, but still end up being true to yourself?
Right.
And I think my upbringing plays a huge role in that. You've got to accept opportunity, embrace opportunity, but you don't have to be untrue to who you are at the core. And I think that's the biggest piece of what guides me, even today.
Have you ever struggled with that?
I haven't. People look at me and they probably think, he talks well. He thinks he's white.
Right.
And I'll tell you something. And I don't really read the comments and stuff like that. But after I got in this role, somebody black had tweeted something and said, well, they made the white folks water boy the state party chair, and I was looking like, this person don't have a damn clue about my life or my upbringing or how I made it to this point. Just because you speak well,
Right.
just because you carry yourself well, don't mean you have caved or conformed or turned into a person that's unrecognizable by your own community. But I also think that's the struggle that so many young black people growing up in the hood face. Like they want to reach for their full potential, but they don't want to look like I look uncool because I speak well, or I look uncool because I wear my pants the proper way.
Right.
It's like,
yeah. I mean, that's a lot, man. That's a lot for people just to unpack because it takes, I think, bravery. You have to be courageous and know who you are, because for some odd reason, and I think it's a lot of self-hate. Just the mentality of an oppressed community, a culture, that, for some reason, blackness has to be synonymous to like either poverty or speaking a certain way or dressing a certain way. And that's not true.
yeah,
But however, we're harder on our black men or women that are in positions of power or influence that may quote unquote sound or talk white or sound proper or just don't sound like the people that they are familiar to speaking like that is black to them.
Yeah.
And that's something I think we're gonna have to address. I've been a victim of it, growing up young in that area. Like, oh, he has on loafers and pants. I can definitely take his money, and not understand, as just a young kid, right? Not understanding like that man or woman could have grown up, if not in a similar rougher circumstance than I did, and they just are in a different road. Doesn't take anything from who they are.
And to your point, it gives you an opportunity to really realize that you can cave to peer pressure and you can be like everybody else.
Right.
And you can let what other people think alter who you become. Or you can stay true and solid on what you're trying to accomplish and who you want to be and feel good about it. Like, hell, if I talk proper and it sounds good, as long as I'm happy with it, oh well. If I wear my loafers and some khakis and a button down and everybody else rocking J's, which all my friends, I'm complete opposite. And I say that for the record. Most of the people who I grew up with, like, I'm completely opposite from them. And I've got like 7 friends who I've been friends with forever. But just because I've changed and I wear suits every day, I've never looked at them and said, your jeans and your J's.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. Or no, we don't look at each other and go, I'm better than you, or I'm not, or you're not as much as me. And I think that's the difference maker, and especially within our community. But one of the things that I've tried to stay true to is, being black. Even when I go into spaces where, and I visited some counties where I go talk to a room of 100 or 200 people, and I'm the only black person that I've seen since I got into the county. But I always say it at the very beginning of those conversations. I go, let me first state the obvious. I look a little bit different than everybody in this room, and everybody just breaks out laughing, because I think people understand that if you're comfortable with who you are and what you can offer and what you can deliver, then you don't have to run away from who you are.
Yeah, man, that's good to hear, because I think too, assumptions, right? A lot of it's because, oh, look at him or look at her, especially in politics.
Yes.
You know, many believe that you can't do both, right? You can't be who you are completely and be in the high level of politics.
Yeah.
So again, man, congratulations. I'm giving you flowers now. I'm glad that you're staying true to who you are. And another point I might add, just before we move on, as black folks and as black men, it's a lose-lose situation, because if you dress like you are a professional, right? People think you're too good.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look at him or look at her. She thinks he's better than everybody else, you know. And if you dress the complete opposite, like a quote unquote like thuggish or urban or pro black or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And that can be whatever. Then like you know. You get chastised for that.
Yeah.
You know, your hair, your beard, your wardrobe. But so it's like, just be you. Because either way, you know, and they say if you don't have no haters, you ain't popping.
Yeah.
And so there you go. But that really resonates with me just personally, because just through my experience, my evolution as a person, like those are some of the things I had to figure out to navigate.
Yeah.
But even though I knew who I was, having to combat it from other people that look like me, right? A lot of times, or just giving me one angle of the story. Like, hey, yeah, you can assimilate, you know, to whiteness, and yeah, you know, you could possibly get moved up, and maybe that works. And that be it. Like, well, tell me the other side. Tell me if I don't assimilate and just be myself, and what happens then? Can I still reach my goal or whatever? And so I always got this one side of the story and then get both. Yeah. So I feel it's important to always, especially youth, give youth both sides. Yeah, if you want to, you can do that. But you know, you can be your complete self, whether you're white, black, Latinx, Asian, whatever it be. You can be your complete self. And the world, you know, it might be coming with a few extra barriers. You know, it's gonna happen anyway, pure off your blackness. Yeah. But like, hey, but you can be comfortable in your own skin, and you'll eventually get there.
And I know we've spent some time on this topic, but I do want to say this, because I think it's important, especially for young African American males and females, black and brown people, to realize that unless I'm walking into a room and saying, "Oh, I'm Hendrell Remus and I'm white," you know, wanting to be successful, wanting to be well put together, wanting to have something different, that doesn't make you white. Right. That doesn't make you want to be white. That doesn't mean you're acting white. That means, hell, I just want to be successful. Right. This is how I want to dress. This is how I want to, you know, I could put on jeans and a t-shirt every day, but I feel like, you know, I feel kind of fly wearing a suit every day.
You're right.
So it's different flavors of what black means. And unless a person standing in front of you saying, "Hey, yo, I'm white," and you clearly black, then I think at that point, that's when you got to start being like, this person's probably a little bit off the rocker. But
man, Hendrell, man, let's get into some politics, man.
Let's do it.
Let's get into some different angles of politics, and I'm gonna go ahead and throw a fastball at you right now. I'm gonna say that politics, voting, has not benefited black folks since about 1968. I would say since socially and economically has it benefit black folks. Therefore, why should I continue to vote, Republican or Democrat? Why should I participate in that freedom and in that right that I have as a United States citizen, even though we all don't have that right, unfortunately, if you've been incarcerated or caged. But why should I continue to practice that right to vote if I see like, man, I don't see no social or economic change for people that look like me, even though we have great representation like yourself in these political parties, have these titles, but I don't see it trickling down to me and my community.
No, I think you're right, and I think you said 1968. I actually think the political process really hasn't benefited black folks the way that it should since Reconstruction. You know, at that point, you know, we were electing black governors and black senators and black Congress folks, and then all of a sudden you have a president that pulled federal troops out of the South And then all hell breaks loose on African Americans. Representation starts to dwindle.
Right.
Rights start to dwindle. And then
Right.
you have situations that led to places like 1968.
Right,
And
Jim
even,
Crow and all that, yep.
even today, systemic racism in our criminal justice system. Even I worked in corporate America for years. Even in corporate America, being the only African American there, you think about how one moment in time changed the future trajectory for so many folks. And I think that moment for African Americans was a president deciding that Reconstruction was gonna end. Right. And from there, I think it's just been a roller coaster ride where you've had these ups and downs where African Americans have these really high moments where we can look at an election of a Barack Obama and be super proud, or look at voting rights acts and things like that and be really proud. But in reality, we shouldn't have to look at these one-off moments and be proud. This should be a regular thing for African Americans and for brown people, right. Black and brown people. But I think the bigger piece is this. People have become so disconnected from politics because politics don't look like folks. Mm-hmm. Politics don't really truly represent where the heart of people is. And politics is probably the most hypocritical business that a person, I mean, I'm in politics, right. But I try to be true to a point where you're not going out and you're not and being a hypocrite. Mm-hmm. And you can't keep serving up the same thing and expecting that people are going to be like, oh, I'm so happy to go out and vote. Right. And people are looking at it like, no, I'm not happy to go out and vote because nothing's changed. Right. My life hasn't really been impacted in a positive way that I can look at and say, oh, when the next administration comes or when the next Congress comes, all of this is going to be rolled back and changed forever. And I think until we get to a point where politics is cementing, mm-hmm. We're talking about like the Voting Rights Act. There's no reason we should be in a situation where we're having to vote to reauthorize, renew laws. Like, where in the hell, right. If it's on the books, it's on the books. This is forever. Right. We don't get an opportunity to say, oh, let's come back in 20 years. If this fails in 20 years, we'll revisit it. Right. If that was the case, we should have been saying that about everything else. Right. We should have been saying that about the Constitution. Right. Oh, if this doesn't work in 100 years, let's come back and revisit it. Right. Because all of the laws that have benefited African Americans, that has been the case. Right. We'll come back and we'll see if we need to reauthorize it or retweak it or if it still applies. Mm-hmm. Come on. Right. Until we get to a place where we're cementing in stone things that benefit African Americans, rolling back a lot of the injustices that African Americans have faced, then that's at that point, I think African Americans will feel good about, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to cast a vote for somebody. But then in that same breath, you have to have representation. And when people see representation, it's just not about putting someone that looks like you in a position. Mm-hmm. It's about someone who's actually thinking like you, someone who's actually willing to deliver the results that will change your life. I'm in politics, but a lot of it, I look at it and I go, you know what, we should be doing something different here, or I wouldn't do it this way because most ordinary folks probably don't care. Right. About the grander scheme of it. It's right. About how does it impact me as a person, and people have so many similarities. It's a broad stroke on if it benefits you as a person. Chances are it's going to benefit most of the people around you or most of the people who look like you, because there's not this very intricate level of policy making like politicians try to sell us. For me, I think they do a better job selling people bullshit than they do actually delivering results on things that matter to people.
Yeah, and I think people are exhausted, right? Yes. Or politics, especially, it's like, okay, even when I get the representation from a look standpoint, right, I see like, oh, they don't represent me mentally or from my ideology when it comes to politics. Like, man, and then I care about power, right? Which representation and power is two different things to me. And I think some people may see them as synonymous. Like, oh, okay, we have power now because I have somebody that looks like me in this position, when that's not the case. How do we get away from that, right? How do we get away from the okay, that person looks like me, so that means like they're gonna give me the benefits that I need to empower my community. What has to happen? Um, who needs to be engaged? How do we get engaged? Or is that something that may always exist a little bit just because like everybody doesn't want to be politically informed the same way? Some people love hey, he or she went up there, was very
Yeah.
charismatic, gave a good speech, and they look like me. He or she has my vote.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. How do you get there? I think accountability is how you get there, because anybody can give a good speech and tell you what you want to hear. It's their actions once they're in those roles, and when their actions are counterproductive to what they've promised on the campaign trail or who they've said that they'll be, it's when that hypocrisy piece kicks in.
Right.
When they do something totally different, people have got to realize that's where the real power comes in. You get a chance to say, you know what? We gave you a shot. You didn't deliver. You got to go. And for a lot of folks, instead of saying you got to go, we get into this mindset of, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. That's just how politics are. No, you put don't forget, you put that person there.
Right.
Just as quick as you put them there, you can get rid of them. You just got to be willing to say, I'm not going to fall into this trap of thinking that's just the way it is. Everybody's going to be this way. You got to start thinking, no, I've got the power to get rid of this person. And when people feel like they've got those checks and balances from the public where I can't go in here and screw over this district or this community. And it can start in one district.
Right.
I can't screw over the folks in this district because I know they don't give a damn how well you speak
Right.
or how much you look like them. If you're not delivering results, then you got to go.
I like that. The only pushback I have, and I want to see if you have alternatives to this, is a lot of these terms are 4, sometimes 8 years, right? Sometimes 2, 4, 8. And so harm and damage has already been done, after 4 years. We're in judicial elections now, right? You elect a judge, he or she is there for 8 years, and it's hard to, so what are some actions community can do, if there are any, if I say, okay, there's a candidate, I voted for him or her, first 2 or 3 years in out of a 4-year term, they're harming my community, and it's a collective sense around that. How can I get him or her out of that before having to wait another 2 years or another, 4 years of harm and damage to my community, that they, again, they ran on one platform and doing a whole different. Is that something that community can do to participate in something like that?
Well, it's something that I learned a long time ago, even before I was in this role. There's 2 things that move politicians: money and the threat of them losing power. When they feel like, okay, the donor base is not going to be there for me because of the situation that's being created, or the opposition has the resources to be able to really prop up a message to highlight either my failures or to get rid of me, then their actions start to change a whole lot. And then there's this people power movement where when you start ramping up pressure on them, when you start really pulling their brand down, it pulls their likability down, because most politicians want to be liked.
Right.
When you're able to start doing that, I think you're going to start having phone calls from folks saying, hey, can we talk about what I can do to help, or what do you all think I should be doing differently? When you see that happening, and I think we see that narrative playing out now, like in the Democratic Party over the last few election cycles, where you have a very progressive side of politics and a more moderate, middle-of-the-road group of folks in politics. And you see the progressive movement across the country has become very vocal, have agitate the hell out of the centrist model. And don't get me wrong, there's some folks in the middle who are great and doing a good job. There's some people on the far left who are great and doing a good job. But you see that narrative play out when career politicians, the status quo, have been there for a long time. When they start to get this agitation, they start to get agitated.
Right.
And they start scrambling because they want to know, hell, I don't want my brand to be tarnished in the midst of this. So what can I do to fix it? And it starts pulling them in a different direction. So that's my opinion. It's having the money
Right.
and then having the power and the influence to agitate the hell out of the situation.
Money. I love talking about money. I majored in economics, got a master in business economics. I'm a money person, right? Um, and I always believed and still believe, um, economics should be the first foundation of any community, right? Building group economics. In my specific case, I really and all in on building Black economic power, because I think it's synonymous to political power, and getting your political agenda heard, seen, recognized, and implemented. Far as when it comes to the Black community in politics, again, two Black men talking, and I think this is crucial. We don't have, nationally in this country, a lot of economic power, right? We see oftentimes in politics a lot of other community agendas being pushed, approved, and other communities taken care of during many administrations. In the Obama administration, one of the things that came up was like, what did he do for Black folks? What has politics done exclusively for Black folks in general, right? And I think economics plays a real role into that, because if I don't have the money, the lobbying power economically to push state legislators and state officials on either party, whatever I represent, it's going to be hard for them to take me serious, I believe, when it comes to getting my agenda fulfilled for what I think is best for my community. What are your thoughts on that, and what can we do? And how does that work? What does that formula look like in politics, and have you seen that work best? And what are some best practices Black folks should do or continue to do to get their agenda, their voices heard and implemented at a state, local, and federal level?
No, I think that's important. Let me say, we have individuals, corporations, big philanthropists who consider themselves allies. I'm an ally of the African American community. Black Lives Matter. We're going to do everything we can
Right.
to move the needle. Where we don't have the resources to lobby folks in Congress, where we don't have the inroads to call up a U.S. senator or call up a president, a lot of these allies do. So from them, we've got to start asking, don't just give us lip service and give dollars to our organizations. Start using your power and your influence to lobby these folks who can really move the needle for us. Use your dollars to keep your dollars. Don't give them to my organization. Use that money to lobby Congress on a criminal justice reform bill. Use that money to lobby Congress on making sure that the small business administration is pumping more money into Black community banks. Use that power to lobby those folks, because just giving me $100,000 to kind of silence me and smile and say, "Oh, this is my friend and this is an ally," man, it's really not moving the needle the way that it needs to be moved. If you really care about me, pick up the damn phone and call somebody who can make long-lasting change happen.
Right.
I think a good model when it comes to Black people, African American people, and power and opportunity and economic opportunity, I think the best model is Atlanta, and Mayor Maynard, and how he was intentional about creating a class of Black wealth, where Black business owners could get government contracts and could thrive, and that system that was put in place to help make that happen. And when we look at African Americans doing so well in places like Atlanta, you have to give credit to very intentional practices that were put into place. That, number one, what you don't want to happen is you don't want systems put in place that's discriminatory, and then the people that they were put in place to protect now becomes the folks who other people are looking at saying, well, I was discriminated against because I wasn't African American. This system was in place for African Americans. You don't want that to happen. You want to put a system in place that's fair, but one that's also very intentional about making sure that fairness is enforced. And I think the best way we get there, in my opinion, I think I think more cities need African American mayors who are going to be intentional about making sure that minority businesses get government contracts. More states need African American governors who are going to be intentional about making sure that that more minority businesses get big government contracts, and that trickle effect is happening, and that African Americans see an opportunity to really say, you know what, I'm willing to move to this state or to this city because I know that there's going to be opportunity there for me if I want it to be there. So we've got to be intentional about the folks who we're electing on the state and local level. And then, again, I think that from the federal government standpoint, the Small Business Administration is the best vehicle to bring money into African American communities with a very intentional goal, infusing cash into small businesses and black community banks.
I want to get into your role a little bit. Then we're gonna get into some more politicky stuff, because Nashville is a blue dot, in a very red pie, So I want to talk about the history of that and like kind of what's that looking like going forward. But you are the new chairman. What power do you possess and have in this new role to kind of facilitate and shape what the Democratic Party looks like for Tennessee?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm a king or anything like that, because I'm not.
Because people, I want to know what does that mean, and again, like I like focusing on power, right, in the decision making that people may or may not have, so that's clear, so people are not expecting something that somebody can't really do. So I want us to get clear about that.
Yeah. So I think the most important role is I have the power to set the tone.
Okay.
For what the Democratic agenda in our state is going to be, whether that's setting it on, and this is a very broad network that I oversee. I mean, there's 72 people on the state executive committee who elects me, and then there's an additional 95 people who represent county parties as county party chairs and all of those officers, and then you've got all the people in this elected to the state house and to the state senate, and you have all these moving pieces. But I think it is the number one responsibility of the state party chair to be the convener of all of these people and to say, this is the direction that we're going to go, and this is how we're going to get there. And if you're not on board, then this is what's not going to happen for you. Right. And if you are on board, this is what we can do together. I think that's the most important piece, because once you set the tone, and for a long time, our state party hadn't had somebody come in and just set the tone and say, you know what, it is what it is. Right. This is it. And I've had to do that on a number of occasions. But I look back on those decisions, and people are saying, I'm glad we did that, or that really worked. If you've got a vision, and if you are the leader, then at some point you've got to be willing to say, this is what it is. Right. I understand that you might want to do something different. I understand that you might have an alternative agenda, but you're gonna have to take that shit and do it somewhere else. Excuse my language. No. You're gonna have to take it, and
this is not a censor.
You're gonna have to do it somewhere else. Right. And I think for a long time the state party hasn't been the convener of those ideas. Now, the state party has the ability to kind of control whether or not we're gonna have who's going to be on the ballot and who's not going to be on the ballot and all of that stuff. But as a state party chair, I wouldn't be the person. I wouldn't, and I'll tell you. Let me walk you through a scenario. Right. We recently had this situation where we've removed people from the ballot. Right. And the way our state party bylaws is set up is that it gives me the sole authority to be able to make that type of decision. It goes to a committee. That committee says this is our recommendation. They give that to the chair, and then the chair decides whether or not we're going to keep this person on the ballot or we're going to remove this person from the ballot. I have taken to the standpoint of I'm not going to be responsible for removing a person who's not done something extremely counterproductive to our morals and our values and our party. So I put it before the entire committee. I empower the folks who've been elected by voters across the state. Now, there are some decisions like what county parties will do. Will they follow a standard set of bylaws, or will they go out and be able to do their own thing? situations like that, I've come in and said, no, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to run every county party this way, and we're going to do everything this way. And if not, then I'll use the power that the state party has. And when I came in, as first couple of months on the job, I had to make an example, as my grandma would say. Sometimes you had to make an example.
Let people know.
So I came in those first couple of months, and we had a county party that was just wanting to do its own thing. We don't care what the state party says. We're going to go out and do it our own way. And as a result, I had to shut the whole county party down and rebuild it from the ground up, because I needed them to understand that this isn't the old state party.
Right.
I mean, we're going to operate a certain type of way, and it's either you're going to get on board or you're going to get run over.
Right.
And I think people have gravitated to that idea that here's an organization that has set some very straightforward goals. Here's leadership that understands where they're trying to go and how they're going to get there. And yes, there's going to be some give and take.
All right.
But there's not going to be a whole lot of caving just because people's feelings are because people are in their feelings. And I get a lot of people just in their feelings.
Not only, see if my research is accurate, not only are you the first elected black elected chair, you're also the first millennial as well.
Yeah, from everything that we could find, that's true.
Right. And so there could be a sense there of generational clash as well. But also a sense of like just freshness, right? Just breath of fresh air. The pulse of community, the city, the nation is changed.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, a lot of these kind of elected seats, don't have any term limits. They can be there until they die, right? But for you have term limit, right?
Yes.
So your term is 2.
Well, there's not per se a term limit,
but you have to go up for re-election
every 2 years. Yeah. So I could keep running every 2 years, keep running every 2 years.
2 years is not a long time.
That's not a long time.
It's not a long.
I'm just months away from like this being all over with.
Right. And so that's not a long time. And if I also read correctly, you weren't the executive committee's recommended choice.
No.
And so
unless if you look at the results, you become he's their choice.
But you're the people's choice.
I wasn't the heir to the throne. No, absolutely not.
And so 2 years, like you said, it's almost up.
Yeah.
2 years is not a lot to make a lot of change, I would say, right? 2 years is really quick. You first year, and then you're trying to, convince people that, hey, re-elect you again. One, do you plan to run for re-election? And two, do you feel like you've been able to touch the pulse enough for people to have the confidence and know and see, like, okay, Rendell, he's going to make the change, and whether you like it or not, he's drawing a line and he's sticking there.
Yeah, I do. That's my intent. I do intend to run for re-election for this job in January. And I also believe that I've started to move the needle in a way that people can see change happening from the state level. No matter where I go in the state, people are always saying, y'all are knocking it out of the park. Y'all are doing things much differently than what the old part. People are recognizing that we've switched gears, that we're doing something different. And that's what I want. I want people to look and see something totally different. I don't want them to feel like we are the old state party. And I know there's still some kinks in that chain that we've got to get out. There's still some situations and some things that we've got to work through to make sure that we're really firing on all cylinders. But no one's ever going to be pleased with everything. Even as state party chair, people tell me, that was great, or y'all did a super job on that. And I'm like, I damn sure wasn't pleased with it,
right,
but I'll take it. But I'll take it if it looks great to you. I'll take it, and I just take this year and 4 months, for instance. When I took this job, I came into an office that was outdated. I mean, my wife and I showed up and she asked me, she said, I don't know if this looks like an old church or a thrift store. So I, number one, had to balance that. How do I create a space that's appeasing enough for people to be able to say, you know what, I want to work there. I want to be able to go in there and work. I mean, people look at what we've done and they don't understand the magnitude of how much I had to really put into trying to rebuild something.
Right.
And I hadn't talked publicly about this a whole lot, but you know, just what I imagined, that the party hadn't been run the way that I think it probably should have been run, was what I anticipated when I got there. I mean, we had one computer in the office. There was no staff. And a month into the job, I get slapped with a $103,000 FEC penalty from years ago for some financial oversight that wasn't followed.
Wow.
So I've spent at least the $100,000+ of the money I've had to go out and raise, not even investing in it and in programs that I wanted to see happen, but to pay off debts that existed. Wow. But now we're in a place where that debt's paid off, where we have a staff, a new brand, where we have an office that people are proud to come to work in. And we're starting to get out into the community, get out into the political space, and really leave our mark in a way that people are saying, I like what I'm seeing. I think we can make a change. I think we can make a difference. And that ultimately has to be what guides us. It's not going to happen overnight. Right. Whether I stay here 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, I mean, what we're up against is probably a decade. Right. It could be a decade before we see change. But if I can look back a decade from now and say, you know, the 2, 4, 6 years that I spent in the job helped to deliver this, or helped to put us on a course to deliver this, I think that'll make me proud, and the folks who are working for me proud to say we played at least a small part in building something much bigger and much greater for the future. We understand that obviously there are going to be forces that's always going to be pushing back. That's always going to be anti everything that we do. But what we've realized is that there's a whole lot of people out there who are committed to wanting to see something different. So we talked about, you mentioned that generational piece. When I took this job, people told me there's an old guard at the state executive committee, or there's an old guard in politics that is not going to be receptive to change. Honestly, I hate to say it, but they've been way more supportive than folks who've just come into the situation. And I think they understand that I have a certain type of leadership style. Right. I mean, once my mind's made up on something, my mind's made up on it. Right. And they feel like, I can be a part of this, or I'm going to be the person who folks look at and say, that person's an agitator, or that person's not really productive to what you're trying to accomplish. And I still get it. It's back and forth. Right. It's give and take. Right. But you just got to be firm on what you want, or why you believe something should be a certain type of way. I think that's the most important part of leadership. How do you pull people over to view things your way, and not you cave and view things their way? And for a long time, we've been in a situation where every time there's a problem, state party chair said, well, you know what, I don't want to deal with the problem. Let's just give them what they want. No. Right. For me, I'm like, tell them to call me. Right. Put them on the phone with me. Right. And I think it's that type. People need to understand that that's never going to stop. I'm never going to be the type of person that they say, well, that person's pissed off about something. We're just not going to do it. That's not going to fly. When they say that person's pissed off about something, I'm going to say, well, he'll get over it, or she'll get over it, or tell them to call me. Right. And I think that's the difference maker. So
I want to get back more into this last leg of the conversation, back on some politics stuff. Yep. I'm a community organizer. I've done a lot of community economic development work here in Nashville, abroad, and other countries overseas and stuff like that. So I like to say that I'm kind of open-minded and understand things and see things from just a different perspective and lens than maybe somebody who just kind of been in the same situation, same bubble their whole life, or for a majority of their life. People, I think, are starting to see blurred lines between Democrats and Republicans. It's hard to tell the difference. So I want to give you an opportunity. Speaking of that, that old guard going into a new guard. What is the mission and purpose now of the Tennessee Democratic Party, with you as chair? What is that mission? What is that purpose? And what is that different from what the Republicans are doing or not doing?
Well, I think if people are seeing a blurred line, then that's problematic.
Right.
I mean, that's problematic.
Right.
That means somebody's not doing their job right.
Right.
And if it's either Republicans and Democrats are failing, or Democrats are failing, or Republicans are failing.
Right.
I tend to believe Republicans are failing. I think that they're holding on to a time in history or time frame of legislation or way that they believe things should be, of cultures that are dying fast. And I think they're fighting with everything that they can to try to keep that intact. I don't see things through a blurred lens. When people, and let me say this, I think the blurred lens is in a lot of southern states, a lot of states that's red states. Mm-hmm. I think where you have a lot of black people who are fairly conservative. I mean, I grew up in Memphis, a majority black city. Mm-hmm. Very democratic city, but a lot of the Democrats there are also very church-going, conservative-minded folks. Now, are they Trump French conservative? Hell no.
Right.
But they're pretty conservative in their thoughts. I think if you're going to get beyond this blurred lines place, it's going to come down to who is embracing a changing America.
Right.
Who is embracing a more progressive America. And how do we sell that level of progressiveness to people? Our focus under my leadership at the state party is always going to be on the bread and butter issues: healthcare, education, and the economy. How do we get people out of jail and get them back to working, getting their records clear? How do we legalize marijuana and expunge criminal records for nonviolent offenses? How do we tax it and use that money to fund education in African-American communities or underperforming schools? How do we make sure that people have access to quality, affordable health care? I mean, it's one thing to have health care, but when you show up at the doctor, is that health care going to be worth anything? How do we make sure that people are not just depending on 2 or 3 jobs that's paying minimum wage or subpar wages, and still struggling to get by? When people look at overtime, when you're at work and you're like I hope there's some overtime out here this week. That's not the way it should be.
Right.
You should be able to work 40 hours, go home, and still live a comfortable life.
Right.
So I think it's those bread and butter issues that's going to try to get us that's going to get us back to a place that we need to be, especially in a state like Tennessee. When we focus all of our energy on culture, cultural issues, whether it's abortion rights or gun rights, and not to say that none of that's important. When we focus all of our energy on that, though, it puts us in a place where Republicans love to have us because they're going to win those arguments every time. When we put that as the forefront of our agenda, when we lead on those issues, it's going to make it extremely hard for us ever to get somebody into that seat who could actually move something on those issues. Right. So my goal is to talk to people about what impacts their life directly.
Right.
People want more money in their pockets, and they want to live long enough to be able to spend that money and leave some for their children. And they don't want a system that's crushing them every time that they apply for a loan or any time that they need help.
Doing this, my community organizing work, especially around education, this word gets thrown around a lot. Preempted, Got all this movement, city officials get down to the state legislator. Preempted, no move, because again, blue dot in a red state. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Democrats used to, have a real stronghold here in Tennessee.
Yeah, a lot of people always say this: red state, red state, red state. Yeah. Actually, until 2010, Democrats controlled the state legislature here in the state. every 8 years, the governor's mansion went Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, up until Bill Lee. So, yeah.
Right.
We're not some
yeah.
red state that's never had Democratic leadership ever.
Right. And it took my research to realize,
Yeah.
oh, okay, we Democrats used to control the
Yeah.
state of Tennessee for a long time.
For a long time. But 10 years under Republican
Yeah,
leadership
but-
has felt like a lifetime of
11,
hell.
10 years. It felt-
It's,
it's like-
it's 11 years been,
Yeah.
felt like a lifetime of hell.
Yeah. And so how does the Democratic Party here in Tennessee like plan to move not into a 12th year
Yeah.
or a 13th year where it's hurting a city like Nashville, where we try to be progressive. We want to do these things around education, healthcare, and all these other things, but it's hard to move that needle at the state legislature because of the people that's in those seats and the party that they represent.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Chances are they're going to be in power longer than we'd like. That's just the nature of how politics go. If we could wave a little magic wand and switch it over overnight, it'd be great. Number one, we've got to get to a point where we break this supermajority. Once we break the supermajority, then we're back in the game. Okay. That's number one. We're back in the game once we break the supermajority. That's a shorter term goal than turning the whole state blue. But when we start talking about this preempting, what I've learned since I've been in this role is that for some reason, Democrats are afraid to take Republicans to court. And they're like, well, you know what? I got to work with these folks or I got to be around these people. I'm like, guess what? Guess who doesn't? Take them to court, because most of what we've seen is that when they end up in court, a lot of what they're doing is unconstitutional. Right. And it ends up getting thrown out, or they end up having to go back and rework the wheels. But I think another big part of pushing back on that preemptive approach that not just here in Tennessee, but Republicans take across the country, when you've got Democrats in control of Congress, in control of the White House, I think the administration, because we're more dependent on federal funds than probably any other state in the country. I mean, we are, and I say this, we are a true welfare state. From the standpoint of Tennessee depends on money from the federal government that they hate so much to keep the state afloat. When we have the power in Washington, we've got to use that to our control. We've got to be willing to say, if you're going to single out specific school districts on X, Y, Z, then guess what? These are the repercussions that you're going to have to face. If you're not going to expand healthcare because of X, Y, Z, then these are the repercussions that you're going to have to face. You can't keep letting people do you wrong and then keep showing up with a gift basket full of gold. Like, oh, here's a basket full of gold. Go out and do some wrong. I think here in this state, we hadn't done enough job to lobby the folks back in Washington to say, hey, stranglehold this funding or hold back funding on this until this legislature and this governor understands that they're going to have to do right by people. And I think you can break through some of the preemption that way. That's my opinion.
I'm a community guy, right? You can see it, right? My mantra is change yourself, change your community, change your world. Real big on community. Doing my plethora of years and just doing community work, I really haven't seen like the Tennessee Democratic Party like kind of like present in that type of grassroots type of coming to a community events or any party, Democrat, Republican, Tea Party, whatever you claim, whatever you repping out here. Yeah. But I think there's probably a need to see more of that. I think we have a lot of great organizations. I'm pretty sure throughout Tennessee, but in Nashville, and these are organizations out of reaction of what's not been happening, and what has not been benefiting the community, whether it's around housing, whether around a black political agenda, whether it's around transportation, homelessness. Right, there's a lot of really great work laborers. Is there a plan, or has there been a plan to be more interaction with those type of community organizations on a local level to for people to understand what's going on with the party, but even also just in this government in general, and how they can be in support, or kind of like, hey, what do you all need for us to do and lobby for, or get the people in these right seats to get the things that y'all trying to get done here at a local level, so we can be in partnership. Does that happen? What does that look like if it does, or is that something that you want to do more of?
Yeah. So one of those things I mentioned earlier about having been in this job for the last year and some months is that I've spent a whole lot of time trying to rebuild relationships that were broken. I mean, there are a lot of broken relationships with labor, with community organizations, and trying to and thinking about how do you rebuild those relationships. You have to take on, in my opinion, this idea that the state party can't do it all.
Right.
The more we're able to work with organizations who are doing the work that we're doing, the more that we're able to not have to put so much of our resources on replicating what people are already doing, on messaging, on mobilization, on community engagement. So from our standpoint, here's what we've tried to do since I've been chair. Number one, we're not an activist organization.
Right.
That's the first order of business that we have to come. We're a political organization.
Right.
We're in the business of identifying candidates and electing candidates,
Right.
and then elevating issues legislative wise, policy issues that's got to move through a legislative maneuvering. How do you get those pieces to become legislation? You've got to work through organizations that's raising hell and really pushing the needle inside the community through organizing.
Right.
And then it becomes a political issue once it becomes legislation. These organizations have access to places and spaces and people that a political party never will have the credibility to be able to impact.
Right.
And just growing up as an African American, you realize that I'm more willing to listen to this organization that I know has been in the hood
Right.
than some politician showing up from Nashville saying, here's what you should do or shouldn't be doing.
Right.
So I think you have to give resources. And we've tried to do that since I've been chair. The more resources we can give to organizations to help with voter registration or to help elevate their message, I think a lot of that aligns with where our messaging is. A lot of these are nonpartisan organizations that we're not asking to be partisan at all, because we believe that these issues will ideally align with the folks who we depend on to vote for us anyway. When we start talking about how we message issues, I've taken the stance that I just don't want some marketing consultant machine telling us, here's how you should talk about criminal justice reform, or here's how you should talk about housing issues. No, organizations are out there already in these spaces talking about it in a much cleverer way.
Right.
We need to start partnering with organizations and making their message our message.
Right.
I think that's how we move the needle and lift everybody together. It has to be a very inclusive standpoint. We have a community engagement director now who's everywhere. I mean, everywhere I go, every time I see anything she's doing, I'm like, this is where we need to be, because she's not afraid to go into any space, and she's effective when she go into those spaces. And she's not afraid to help mend relationships and create new relationships that can really help us expand our footprint and our reach into areas that we hadn't. So giving resources to those organizations, partnering with them, making their message our message on a lot of those policy issues that the community is dealing with, I think is very important. I believe that's how you begin to close that gap.
One of the last points I want us to talk about, redistricting that's happening. I don't know kind of if it's going to be something that to redraw the map, or if it's going to be able to be something where lawmakers say, hey, this seems unconstitutional. This is like, I don't know where it is at this current moment. Maybe you can update us, but it looks like that's going to be something that hurts a lot of Tennesseans, especially cities like Nashville, and that's going to affect a lot of Black and brown votership as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and update us if there are any updates on what that redistricting is looking like in the maps, and who's going to be affected and what this ultimately could lead us to?
So I think the biggest piece, especially that impacts Nashville, is the congressional district. We know that Jim Cooper in District 5 got chopped up into three new districts. It's a tough fight. You know, and I try not to. I try not to give people false hope, but it's a tough fight to move it in the legal system because the very argument that we want to make on a congressional redistricting argument, they're trying to make out of Alabama right now. And the Supreme Court has said, well, it's too close to the election. Let's pump the brakes on it. Maybe next year we'll give a decision. And that decision is probably going to set the precedence for what happens in Nashville when we make a legal challenge, and what happens in Louisiana when they make a legal challenge on the same issue. Almost identical issue. It will set a new precedent for how redistricting on the congressional side is handled in the South. So we've got to have patience. That's the part a lot of folks don't want to hear. It takes patience. In the short term, we've got two candidates who I think are going to be phenomenal in District 5, Heidi Campbell, and then District 7, Odessa Kelly. I think they're going to be phenomenal in helping to move the needle for Democrats in these districts. And we've got our sights set on fighting as hard as we can to keep them, pull 7 into the Democratic column, and hopefully keep 5 in the Democratic column. And long term, whether it's 2 years from now or 4 years from now, there may be a shocker of turn of events where what has happened comes back to bite Republicans. But depending on that Supreme Court ruling on the Alabama map, I think it'll kind of give us the lay of the land on what the legal decision will be when we bring our maps on the congressional maps. Now, from the state perspective, the state Senate and the state House maps, we have been footing the bill for a group of plaintiffs who are suing the state legislature, governor, and the Secretary of State and Elections Office for those maps, because not only were they racially gerrymandered, but we're not even focused on that because we know that happened.
Right.
The thing is, they were also very much unconstitutional. They didn't follow the state law. I mean, you don't follow the law, you don't follow the law. It's unlawful. It's unlawful. And I know a lot of people they ask, well, why isn't the state party the plaintiff in this case? For us, it just makes more sense to have ordinary people out moving the needle on this issue, wanting to be the voice that brings a legal challenge and a legal change. Because, the party could be a plaintiff, but the Tennessee Democratic Party is not voting.
Right.
But John or Susie Doe or Jane Doe actually has to go out there and cast a vote. They're the people that's actually impacted.
Right.
So if we can support their efforts, it's just a smarter thing to do. And we know that a lot of these people don't have the resources to be able to mount the type of legal challenge that it's going to take to move the needle. We saw some positive signs, though, in this challenge so far, where the state Senate maps, there was an injunction issued by this new 3-panel court put in place by the state Supreme Court, and they gave the state legislature 15 days to draw a new map. Obviously, the state challenged it, appealed it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, no, well, they don't have to abide by that injunction. They've just got to now take these maps to trial. These maps will join the House maps in trial. So we're anticipating the lower court has already ruled that what happened was unlawful.
Right.
They didn't follow the state constitution. The House maps, we believe, are going to follow the same trajectory. Right. I mean, you don't follow the law, you don't follow the law. That's black and white.
Right.
What we're fighting these maps is based on, did you follow the law or not as it is written? And Republicans haven't done that on a number of things. So the state Senate maps, state House maps, I think once it goes to trial, the outcome is going to be favorable for the plaintiffs in that case. By default, I think it'll benefit Democratic voters because obviously the maps that were drawn were designed specifically not to do that by being unlawful.
Right.
I think it benefits us in the long term on the state House and Senate side. Now, that trial will probably happen at some point later this year, and we probably won't see new maps in this legislative term. But if they have to be redrawn, then the next elections will be impacted by what those new maps look like.
Okay. Thanks for that update, because I know there's just been something that's, I know on a lot of people's mind, I know Equity Alliance has done a lot of work around that here locally and on the state level, because they even have something office there in Memphis actually too. So I know they do a lot of good work. Shout out to them.
And
Man.
it's one of those things that, you know, per se, if we would have challenged MAPS 10 years ago, if the state party would have challenged MAPS and really hunkered down for a long haul fight 10 years ago, we might be in a different place today
Right.
than we are now. So for us, it's about, you know, we understand that people want it now and they want it to happen now, but if we're able to pull this off in a way that where voters have a fair representation in the state house and state senate and in Congress, and if it takes us a year to get there, what it will do for us for the next 10 years is going to be important.
Man, I want to kind of close out on this note, kind of two things. And at the beginning of this, I kind of said, "Hey, why should I vote? Why should I get involved in politics?" You know what I'm saying? Because I haven't seen the benefits of it. I want to flip it a little bit and say, you know, if people don't get involved in politics, right? If people don't get out there and vote, if people don't go get informed, what could be some of the residual effects of that? And, you know, ultimately, what could be the residual effects of, you know, our next presidential election? It's in 2024 when, you know, people, especially on the Democratic side, I think people, just normal everyday people, is like, oh, think Trump is going to run again. You know, what is that going to look like for the country? Oh, we seen the mayhem before and what that stirred up in this country, and so why should I get involved? What does getting involved look like? And how could I get prepared for 2024? There could be another kind of, you know, fascinating election climate.
I think, and the reason I got involved with politics is because I realized that the power, the real political power, truly does rest in the hands of ordinary people, of people who get up and go vote. I mean, we saw that in 2020. People couldn't stand Trump. Maybe they didn't like President Biden, but they couldn't stand Trump. And we saw what that power did. It turned out more people at the polls than ever in the history of voting in this country. I mean, so you see when people are mobilized and engaged and intentional about wanting change, what is possible. Now, if you don't get engaged and if you don't get involved, I think what we're looking at is an inflection point in our country where I mentioned in the very beginning, there are some people who are fighting like hell to keep this country in a place where they feel culturally empowered. And we're at this crossroads where we have to decide, are we paving the way for a new America that's more inclusive, that's more equitable, that's going to make sure that everybody gets a fair shot and an equal opportunity at a more prosperous and progressive life? Or are we okay with just standing by and watching the old guard, whether or not that's Democrat or Republican leaders who are entrenched in the status quo? Are we okay with standing by watching the old guard keep things where they're comfortable with?
Right.
I don't even want to say where they like them being or where they don't like them being, where they believe that they're comfortable at. If we are going to be the generation that forges us into the next phase of what America can be, of what the world will become, because obviously America will set the precedents for what the world becomes.
Right.
Are we okay with just accepting being stagnant or going backwards?
Right.
Or are we going to be the force that says, to hell with that, we're moving forward at all costs?
Right.
And it's this generation, it's this moment where we're really having to toggle back and forward with deciding who do we want to be, where do we want to go, and what role do we want to play in that. And I think all of us have the power to play a positive role in setting the future up to be something that's way more important than big corporations or career politicians who refuse to impose term limits on themselves.
If somebody doesn't want to be a politician, because I think a lot of times civilly, that's how people feel like I have to run for something. To like, what are some other alternatives outside of being a candidate for in an election to be civilly engaged and informed and to affect what the outcomes are for a city, a state, a community, or a country?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to run for office,
Right.
to be the most impactful voice in the room. I think the most impactful voice in the room is what scared politicians the most. You just got to be willing to let your voice be heard, whether that's knocking on doors in your community, whether that's sitting in a coffee shop and encouraging people to get engaged and be involved. I mean, you don't have to hold a fancy certain particular role. You just got to be willing to not sit quietly or sit idly by and watch chaos ensue in the political process. You've got to be willing to encourage people to step up to the plate and really take their constitutional right. Don't take it for granted. Right. Go out and utilize it. And you've got to be willing to empower people that with the knowledge or the notion that they too have real power. And I think if folks are willing to do that, the more people who are willing to do that, the more knowledgeable we become about issues, the more engaged people become about what the political process looks like. And I'll tell you a short story. You look at, people always talk to me about Georgia. One of the things that happened in Georgia that was revolutionary in organizing, the length that they went to with their relational organizing. Right. When you had a coordinated campaign, Ossoff and Warnock coordinated campaign, and a John Ossoff campaign who said, we're going to hire organizers who don't know a damn thing about politics, who don't know who the mayor is, who don't know who the governor is, who could care less about what foreign policy is. The more people were able to say, I'm disconnected from politics, the more they wanted to hire them because they thought, and their thinking paid off, if you are so disconnected from politics, then your friends and family, the people you're around on a daily basis, are probably just as disconnected. And as a result, those young people were able to go out and find people who were just as disconnected as they were and tell them about why it was important to vote, why it was important to register to vote, and then mobilizing and engaging them to move the needle in that state. Right. So it's got to be an intentional effort by ordinary people to want to be a part of that change.
Man, I really appreciated your time. And I want to bring you back because there's a lot more, and we got some big elections coming up next year. We got some big elections, and so I want to bring you back because you know we got the mayoral candidate election coming up next year, the governor, Governor Lee. Man. So
and I always tell people, so many people say, you're knocking it out the park now. I like you. I always say, come see me a few days after the elections are over. Yeah, and we'll see if you still like me.
We're gonna bring you right back right after that. Like we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait until these. But I want to definitely bring you back right before once we get into the mix of it, because 2023 is gonna be a big year. And I want people to be informed because, there's some things happening that it's like, come on now, what's going on? And so I love to bring you back and just on a regular basis because, people don't always know. People, when they see you a lot of times, maybe it's so much in a kind of formal, serious, really politics. And sometimes things can go over people's heads. Yeah. Right. And I know a lot of times you don't get the time to really articulate and be able to simplify things for people who may not be in the daily politics or it's just in that sphere all day, every day to understand what's really going on. So, man, I really appreciate you taking the patience with us and breaking down some things that are happening, but also just, learning a little bit more about you. And we got to get some pictures of you in them dreads, man, so people can say, oh, yeah, he was outside back then with us. And so, but I want to give you the last word and just, is there anything that, you want to leave us with? Whether that's how people can reach out to you, or just party connection, or just something that people should, reflect on and keep on their mind, after listening to this interview, man.
Absolutely. One of the things, I am very accessible. I mean, if I'm nothing else, I'm very accessible. I haven't even changed my phone number. I still got the same cell phone number. So if there's something that you want clarity, that people want clarity on about what we're doing, or how we're doing it or why we decided to do it. I mean, if they can't reach the staff, can always reach out to me via email, or I'm on all the social media platforms. I mean, I still answer my own stuff on there, so that's very important.
Right now, y'all, I don't know, hey, in a couple of years we don't know, but so get them now.
But yeah, reach out. I do encourage people to reach out to me, because there's nothing more than I like telling people about what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, and so that they have a real understanding of it. But also, I want people to be engaged. I mean, you've got a chance this year. We've got 3 elections happening this year. One happening right now.
Yeah.
You got 3 chances this year for you to help inspire somebody else to bring change in the community. Register to vote, go out and vote, and then learn about the people who are in power. So you can either vote for them or vote against them.
Right.
You have the power to make the difference. That's the most important message that I could ever tell anybody. When it comes to politics, your vote is so powerful.
Right.
You just got to be willing to use that power.
And we've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
Like your vote has a lot of power. Every vote counts and everything like that. I think it's time for a new slogan. But I think it's time for something else to be just as impactful.
Yeah.
And especially if things keep going the way they do. We go, hold on now. Like we've been here for 10 years. My vote is powerful, and I don't know about that no more. And so I'm just gonna throw that out there to all parties. We need to be thinking of a new slogan now to get people out. But I would say this: it is important to get out there and make an informed decision and learn about each candidate. And I was really jaded about voting for a long time, very long time, rightfully so, I believe. But really invested in the local elections, because those people you can run into the grocery store.
Yes.
You can say, hey, what are you doing? But you can really hold accountable. But start learning about policy. Who's making the who? Then you get to state legislator. Oh snap! I need to. But a lot of those people don't seem as accessible, I think, to many of us. So we just say, I don't even know who this person is, or what he or she does or doesn't do, until you're actually affected by it. A lot of times. So, man, I hope this is just you talking about relationship building. I hope this is a relationship we continue building, continue to have on, and give you this, this Randall uncut version that you're not gonna see anywhere else. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you. And until next time, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.